patients! Stop arresting patients! Stop arresting patients!
Welcome to CMMNJ TV.
Every 42 seconds, someone is arrested for marijuana.
I'm Ken Walski, Executive Director of the Coalition for Medical Marijuana New Jersey. The mission of our organization is to educate the public about the benefits of marijuana. Marijuana is a safe, effective, and inexpensive therapeutic agent for a wide variety of diseases, symptoms, and conditions. No patient should suffer needlessly without it, and no patient should ever go to jail for following the advice of a doctor. Join us and learn more about the exciting science of medical marijuana.
I'm Jim Miller. I'm the co-founder of the Coalition for Medical Marijuana New Jersey, a nonprofit organization in good standing since 2003. I'm here to have a brief chat with Mr. Jim Price. He's the website administrator for the Coalition for Medical Marijuana and an activist for medical marijuana causes, one whom I've watched crossover from being an advocate to an activist, and I got to say I wish he'd been an activist a little longer than he has, because he's become a very valuable piece of what we do at the Coalition.
I think you give me far too much credit, Mr. Miller, but I certainly appreciate your kind words.
We all know that alcohol leads to deterioration of the liver. It can manifest in violent behavior and can exacerbate depression. That's beyond debate. If you take the position that cannabis is less dangerous to one's health than alcohol, if we looked at them in a side-by-side comparison, what is cannabis, and what do you mean when you say it's less harmful?
When we say that cannabis is less dangerous than alcohol, you can use whichever objective metric you want. I mean, whether we're talking about the physical damage that alcohol does, the neuroprotectant benefit of cannabis, loss of productivity on the job, harm to society, risk of overdose, a degree of impairment, risk of physical dependence, alcohol is by far the more dangerous substance, proven over time. We celebrate with alcohol. We demonize and criminalize cannabis.
It makes me want to not have a drink later when I go home. When you line it all up like that, I thought I had a good grip on it. You know, and we do often hear people say, I really need a drink, or I've had a hard day at work, I could use a drink. It's said so often that you don't really bat an eyelash at it. But in reality, if you're already depressed, alcohol can worsen your depression. Does cannabis have a comparable effect? Can it worsen depression if it was taken in the same vein of that you really needed something, but rather than alcohol, if it was cannabis, could it also worsen depression, and could it make a bad day worse?
From a pharmacological standpoint, alcohol is a central nervous system depressant. This system regulates our breathing, our heartbeat, and our consciousness. You can go to a bar on your 21st birthday and line up 21 drinks on the bar, consume them all, lose consciousness, slip into a coma, and die. They are consuming a substance that is acting on a part of the brain that regulates life. That is why we see the risk of overdose when taking opiates, and the same is true about alcohol in a dose-dependent manner. Cannabis has therapeutic, physiological, and mood-altering qualities because of components in the plant known as cannabinoids. Those cannabinoids interact or act on specific receptors known as the androgenous cannabinoid regulatory system within the human body. While there are specific receptors present in the brain, there are very few in the brain stem, unlike opiate receptors, which alcohol also affects. This is the reason why it is incapable of causing life cessation, meaning the end of life. It is not present in the central nervous system, which regulates life.
You know, I've heard a lot about the effects of cannabis from prohibitionists, and all drugs have side effects. I think we've all had an opportunity to drink too much alcohol. I did one time. And the next day, you know, we feel lousy, you got a headache, dehydration, sometimes vomiting. They're known by a really innocuous name of the day after effects, as if that's just to be expected. What are the side effects of cannabis?
Well, Jim, there's a common joke about the community that cannabis gives you the munchies. While that may be true and would back up one of the primary prescribing reasons for Marinol, observation shows us that a typical cannabis consumer has a healthier BMI, which is your body mass index. And this means that their bodies are typically leaner, not fatter. Cannabis is not a single molecule plant. It is a plant that contains a multitude of therapeutic ingredients, many of which are believed to be biologically active. Depending on which compound we're talking about, there is either going to be a mood-altering effect, a therapeutic effect, or a physiological effect. Yes, cannabis can increase your heart rate and blood pressure temporarily. Some first-time users report tachycardia, which is a faster than normal heart rate while a person is at rest. A healthy adult heart normally beats 60 to 100 times a minute while at rest. If you experience tachycardia, the upper and or lower chambers of the heart can increase in beats. This is why I think a patient's handbook, which is a recent project that we've undertaken, is a necessary tool that can be utilized. Keeping it strictly limited to a side-by-side comparison of alcohol and cannabis and showing potential risks. It's been demonstrated time and time again that alcohol damages not only your physical person, but it can have an effect on your productivity at work. It can manifest itself in violent behavior towards your spouse or your children. It can generally exacerbate a bad mood, and none of that happens with cannabis. The exact opposite is true. If you're in a bad mood and you smoke some cannabis, your mood's going to be elevated. We don't fully understand all of the cannabinoids in cannabis. So we don't know what every single thing in the plant does. But I can tell you that prohibition is a lot more dangerous to people than actually consuming cannabis.
Prohibition. Speaking of prohibition, cannabis is on what's called Schedule 1 in the Controlled Dangerous Substances Act. How did it end up as Schedule 1? As I understand it, a Schedule 1 drug has no accepted medical value in the United States. It has a high propensity for abuse. Everything that you've said seems quite opposite that, and yet it's still in Schedule 1, which keeps it from being studied in many cases. How did it get in Schedule 1? I mean, how did that happen? What happened?
We could actually guess at people's motivation back then and try to determine what their true reasoning was, but I think the truth is a lot easier to come to. It was actually added to the Controlled Substances Act in 1970 under Richard Nixon's newly formed DEA. And while there may be a racial aspect to that, I do know that President Nixon asked for a report to be generated on the benefits of using cannabis. When that report reached his desk, he decided to ignore it. If you look at a side-by-side comparison of cannabis and alcohol, it's really clear which one should be on the Controlled Substances Act and which one should not. A, alcohol does not have any therapeutic value whatsoever. If you want to make that argument a little bit finer and go with the red wine argument, yes, there are components in red wine where a glass a day, and we're talking about 8 ounces or less, of red wine can actually have a health benefit to it. Beer, it's not there. Whiskey, it's not there. Vodka, it's not there. Cannabis is always there. Of course, when you have different strains, you're going to have different effects, whether they be physiological, mood elevating, or physical health benefit. The important thing to look at is the amount of damage that you can see done by alcohol. And I mean, look all around you because the signs are there. People have a fear about what is unknown. And truthfully, because the government has spent so much money on finding out what is wrong with cannabis, they haven't spent nearly as much money on finding out what benefits can cannabis give us just by consuming it. And I'm not talking about smoking it. You know, there are other options available to people other than just smoking it. If you look at the Controlled Substances Act and Schedule 1, there are 3 criteria. It has no health benefit. It has a high potential for abuse, and it is one of the most dangerous substances on the planet. Looking at that, and then the drugs that it shares Schedule 1 with, which basically are LSD, MDMA, and a number of other really physically wrecking substances. Cannabis does not belong there. Could alcohol be added to Schedule 1? I believe it could.
Very, very good. And the Schaefer Commission that you refer to, that was done at the behest of Richard Nixon, actually say very much what you're saying. I mean, it's just a more in-depth paraphrase of Judge Francis L. Young, the administrative law judge with the DEA, saying that it being in Schedule 1 is arbitrary and capricious. And that's the only time I ever hear the word capricious used. But I know what it means.
Yes.
And I appreciate you putting it in a context that's easy for me to understand as well as anybody else. And thanks for being here today and sharing what you know with us. While we have you here, everybody's got a story. Some would rather not tell it, some don't mind. And I have watched you go from being an advocate to an activist. And I know it involves a personal story. I actually have never really asked you to tell me about it. I pick up what I know. But would you mind telling us your relationship to cannabis, the personal story, why you've come to do what you do and what your personal interest is? I know what you do for everybody else is not because of you. You do for other people like I do for other people, but you have a reason that you do this originally, and if you don't want to share it, I understand. But
how could I not after that long introduction? How could I just sit here and say, no, I'm not sharing it?
Then I did my job. So what's going on, Jim?
It's like you said, you know, I don't do this for myself. I know how to take care of myself. I know how to do what I need to do in order to survive. But unfortunately, in September of 1999, I suffered a workplace injury. I was a company guy, and being a company guy, you always want to try and protect the company. Of course, I didn't know that I was going to hurt myself. So that was a little disconcerting. But anyway, there was a box, a 110-pound box of weights. It's in a retail store. It was in the middle of the aisle. And in my opinion, it was a trip hazard. So it had to be moved. Unfortunately, we had just gone through a workforce reduction, which we do around that same time every year. We reduce the number of hours that we are allowed to have for our employees. So I didn't have somebody that I could call to come and move this box for me. I'm a big guy. I've always been a big guy. At that point, I believe I weighed 235 pounds with a 32-inch waist. So you can imagine the kind of musculature that I had on my frame at that point. So a 110-pound box of weights didn't even raise an eyebrow for me. Unfortunately, moving the box dropped me to my knees immediately. And because I had been in the gym the number of times that I had, for the duration that I had, for the number of years that I had, I just assumed it was muscular. And you know what? I've had backaches, and I've had backaches directly from lifting weights. So it didn't raise my caution, really. I just thought, it's muscular, not a big deal. I continued to work for 2 weeks after that until I really couldn't stand the pain anymore. And I asked to see the company doctor. At that appointment, the company doctor asked me, "Why are you still working?" To which I replied, "I have to make money in order to take money home and provide for my family, so that's why I was still working." And he said, "You're out of work effective immediately." Not only that, but the injury happened in September, and I was operated on by December. I mean, just as quickly as they could make it happen. And if you can imagine the red tape that they had to jump through with the insurance company, getting the doctors on board, all of these things happening and then happening that quickly, you know my situation was dire. So basically what happened was I herniated the disc between the vertebra L5 and the vertebra S1, which is at the very bottom of your spine. In my estimation, it's the most difficult disc to herniate, but now we're finding out that more people are herniating it. Also, the 2 discs directly above it are not herniated, but they're absolutely bulging. So you have 3 discs in a row that are putting impact on the central nervous system, the nerve root, on a daily basis. Not just a daily basis, but a moment-to-moment basis. It's causing inflammation. The nerve root doesn't like to be disturbed. It likes to just lay there and do its job. It doesn't want things pushing up on it, and basically that's what the disc was doing. So what they did was they did a partial discectomy and a laminectomy. So basically they're cutting away part of the disc and cutting away part of the bone to try and allow room for the nerve root to just hang out and do its job, to not have to deal with the inflammation on a moment-to-moment basis. And of course, you know, one of the things that happened from the first doctor visit was a prescription. And back in those days, they were handing out prescriptions like candy on a doorstep at Halloween. You have pain? Here, take this. And of course, the first prescription was for Percocet. And I remember the dosage exactly. It was 5 milligrams of codeine and 325 milligrams of acetaminophen. Both, I have found out, both of those substances are liver killing. So that was the starting point. And then we come 10 years later, and you have to keep in mind tolerance and the fact that your tolerance grows, which means that your dosage has to be increased. The number of medications that I was on, at one point I was taking 9 different prescriptions. They included Neurontin, OxyContin, Roxicet, Cymbalta, Remeron, and tizanidine. All of those compounds were supposed to help me with my pain, but unfortunately, all they did was aggravate the situation. That's the way that it felt to me. My pain was never under control. Every time I went back to the doctor, he'd ask me what my pain level was. Some days it was a 9, some days it was a 10. And understand when I say 9 or a 10, that's the pain level that you cannot stand. It drives you out of your mind. That's how high the pain level is. Okay? Now, no miracles have taken place, yet I've been able to leave those narcotics behind and move forward with my life. Not stagnate, not stay in the same place, but actually move forward with my life. I had developed an allergic reaction, what I consider an allergic reaction, to the codeine and the other prescriptions that I was taking. So I brought this to the attention of my doctor and I said, you know what, doc, I think we really need to rethink what we're doing and perhaps wean me off of these medications. His first thought was, I'll send you to a rehab and we'll get it done that way. Probably would have been the best case scenario, but obviously we're dealing with an insurance company and they have the final say as to whether or what they're going to pay for. So he went to the insurance company knocked it back, said, no, we're not going to pay for a rehab. And yet, the insurance company is the one that's paying for the pharmaceuticals every month, which my bill on any given month was anywhere between $2,600 and $3,700 for the number of prescriptions that I was taking. Okay, so doc, codeine isn't working. And we went the other way too. You know, I took morphine sulfate in the form of Cadian. I took the fibromyalgia medication, Lyrica, which is also a nerve agent. It's a lot like Neurontin is, and it's supposed to help with neuropathic pain. So we took a break from the codeine, we went with morphine, that didn't help. We took a break from Neurontin, went with Lyrica, that didn't help. Now we're back in the same position that we were before. I'm on Neurontin, OxyContin, Roxicet, all of those drugs. And I'm developing skin rashes and redness. And I brought this to the attention of the doctor. He had one word to say to me, and I will remember that word for the rest of my life. He said Marinol. Marinol. Okay, I've never heard of this drug. I have no idea what it does. I don't know what it's based on. So I go home and I start my research. I have to say, my doctor is the reason why I'm an activist today. He started me on this path with that one word, Marinol.
Wow. And certainly not a Lyrica commercial. When was that? When did you first hear about Marinol? What year? Just so we get a time reference.
It was in 2010, and we're in 2014 now. So just 4 short years ago is when I stopped taking the narcotics, started taking Marinol, and around the same time I started supplementing with cannabis in the raw.
So you supplemented Marinol with raw cannabis?
Yes.
Okay.
Because my research had showed that THC alone is probably not enough to help you with your pain.
Component of marijuana that was overlooked for a long time is cannabidiol, referred to as CBD. What can you tell us that you know about cannabidiol? And it's become very well known now, especially through use in pediatric forms of epilepsy, is where it's gotten national recognition. But a lot of people still don't know much about it. They just hear CBD, muscle relaxation. Is there something you could add to it that I might not know about CBD?
Absolutely, and not to lose the entire audience right now, going into the deep science of things, which I like to call myself the science guy when it comes to cannabis.
Oh, he is. Yeah.
Stop it.
He's also a bully, but
CBD has anti-inflammatory properties. It has neuroprotectant properties, which is why it works with children who have epilepsy. It acts as a cell rebuilder in the brain. You know, a common prohibition statement is that cannabis causes brain damage, when it's the exact opposite. It doesn't cause brain damage. It can actually help repair the cells in your brain. The anti-inflammatory properties of cannabis, the neuroprotectant value, there are, you know, we say CBD, and CBD really doesn't tell the entire story. There are 60 known cannabinoids of them. You have a special receptor in your brain for CBD. There are actually 2. They're called CBD1, CBD2. Those receptors only react to cannabidiol. Why would we have this system in our bodies if we weren't meant to use cannabis? I invite anybody who's a prohibitionist, anybody who says you shouldn't be doing this, to show me the science of why we shouldn't be doing this, and have a mind that's open enough that you'll accept my answer, which is science-based research on how it can benefit humans.
it shows.
I'm a perfectionist, and I don't like making mistakes. So I surveyed the crowd of people who had high profiles as activists, and I decided on Mr. Jim Miller as my mentor.
That's a pretty heady compliment, but I want to thank you, Jim, for sitting here and talking with us today, and I want to especially thank you for sharing your personal story, because I know you do guard your privacy, as many people do. I appreciate you doing that. I hope to have you back
Jim,
again.
it's not really a privacy issue. It's more of, I'm well versed in my story, and I really don't understand why people would be interested in my story. I don't get that. I have been telling my story a lot more recently. I did it in front of the State House with our weekly Trenton protest.
Yeah, I got to say, let me interrupt you to say how refreshing that is, because mostly I know people who their story is all about them. I know a lot of that. It's seldom that somebody says, I don't know why anybody wants to hear about what I have to say.
It's true.
It's because it's relevant. That's why. It's because people can understand it, and it's because you're kind of that everyday guy. You can't see your pain. You're a big, strong guy looking like that. And I think it helps what you're saying now, that we can all understand that you can't just look at a person and recognize the level of his disability by what you see. So
No, not
I
at
think
all.
that's
And
awesome
you know what?
right there.
I remember the comment that you made the first time I visited you at your house. Your comment, word for word. You look healthy as hell, man. And it's true. You know, you look at me on a good day, you can't tell there's anything wrong with me.
For more information about the Coalition for Medical Marijuana in New Jersey, join us at our free public meetings on the second Tuesday of every month at the Lawrence Township Library in Mercer County, New Jersey, from 7 to 9 p.m. Snacks are served and all are welcome. Remember, every 42 seconds, someone is arrested for marijuana.
Every 42 seconds, someone's arrested for marijuana.
Every 42 seconds, someone is arrested for marijuana.
Every 42 seconds, somebody's arrested for marijuana.
Every 42 seconds, someone is arrested for marijuana.
Every 42 seconds, someone's arrested for marijuana.
Every 42 seconds, someone is arrested for marijuana.
Every 42 seconds, somebody is arrested for marijuana.
Every 42 seconds, someone is arrested for marijuana.
Every 42 seconds, someone's arrested for marijuana.
Every 42 seconds, someone is arrested for marijuana.
Every 42 seconds, someone is arrested for marijuana, Lefty. And you're not one of them.
Cada 42 segundos está uno arrestado por marihuana.
Every 42 seconds, somebody is arrested for...
Every 42 seconds, someone in this country is arrested for marijuana.
Chaque 42 secondes, il y a un monde pour marijuana.
Every 42 seconds, someone is arrested for marijuana.
Every 42 seconds, someone is arrested for marijuana.
Every 42 seconds, someone is arrested for marijuana. It could be you.